Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We have the 2025 Monte Carlo draw preview to get into, and the draws out is the first Masters 1000 tournament in the clay court swing. I cannot wait to get into the predictions. There's so much to dive into because this is a time of the year where I just feel like it gets very interesting on the ATP Tour. It's actually my favorite time of the year, the clay court swing, and it's the first clay court season without Rafa Nadal, so it's going to be very open, I would imagine anyway. So there's going to be a lot to play for, and I've actually got the projected quarterfinals, so we're going to get into that. Then we're going to pick every single match, and ultimately I'll give you guys my champion. Before we do get into it, though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Also, make sure you do hit that notification bell so you get alerted to all new uploads. So there's a couple of things to just bear in mind. So we're going to be doing this draw preview with the assumption that the qualifiers are going to lose in their first round or second round matches. Now, the reason why is because, unfortunately, because of the timing, really, of the Monte Carlo Masters, some of the qualifiers are finishing only an hour or two before three of the round of 64 or first round matches in Monte Carlo. So we've got three matches in the first round tomorrow, which is Sunday, and there's some qualifying matches, or the final qualifying matches even, will be played just before that. So it's impossible to do this video in between because it's just not doable, which is a bit of a shame. But in terms of qualifying, I think Medvedev is in there. I mean, he's in qualifying. He's had a decent last few weeks, but he's not as accomplished on clay. Ramos Vinolas is in there. Boo's in there. Goffman's been playing some good tennis, but again, it's clay. Navon is a good clay courter, but there's not. I'm going to be honest, I don't think any of these players are going to make deep runs in this Masters tournament. They could prove me wrong, but I'm not sure that they will. The only two actually that I think might, and it's actually a qualifying match, and I think whoever comes out of this matchup might make a run, is Marjan and Bellucci, one of those two. So keep an eye out potentially for those. Okay, in terms of projected quarterfinals then, Zverev and Tsitsipas is the first one in the top half of the draw. That would be an interesting matchup. Tsitsipas is the reigning champion in Monte Carlo. He's won it 3 times, and he clearly loves Monte Carlo. Zverev, look, I mean, he's been in freefall since the Australian Open final, so I think that would actually be a very bad matchup for him if he were to even make it to the quarterfinal stage. Let's see how he gets on in this tournament. It's a chance for him to just try and put a lot of the bad losses in the last few weeks and months behind him, because he's really struggled for form, and I think he's been quite miffed as to why, from what I can tell, because he said as much in some post-match presses as well. Djokovic Dimona is the second projected quarterfinal in the top half of the draw. And in the bottom half, we've got Jack Draper and Casper Ruud. I mean, Jack had a fantastic Sunshine double. I mean, I know he lost early in Miami, but of course won Indian Wells. And I think for him, these conditions actually are more like Indian Wells, with the heavy conditions, very conducive to topspin, slower. The one thing that he will have to really hone in this clay court swing is the movement, because the sliding and the movement on clay is very different to hardcore. I think his actual game, he has the tools to succeed on clay, but the movement, which I think is arguably the most important thing on any surface, is something that we'll need to keep an eye on and see, does he get to grips with it really quickly? Maybe he doesn't. And then Alcaraz Rublev is the other quarterfinal at the bottom. So Rublev won this title 2 years ago, so he has some good memories here as well. And he's had like an up and down year. It hasn't been fantastic, if I'm being honest, and he has struggled for some continued form for quite some time. He's playing the UTS in France at the moment on clay, as is Rude and Demoner. So those guys are getting some different match practice before Monte Carlo. Okay, let's get into the draw then. So Zverev has a bye. Berrettini plays the qualifier. So as I said, I'm going to pick the player who's made the main draw. So in this case, Berrettini. Then Lehechka and Korda is an interesting one on clay. I don't think either player is particularly super comfortable on clay. But Korda has actually had some good results from memory in the past on clay. Lehechka, not many come to mind. I'm going to go with Korda, but if I'm being honest, it's a real 50-50. I don't think either player will play their best tennis on this surface. Musetti to be a qualifier. Musetti will be and should be in his element, Monte Carlo onwards now, because he loves the clay. He's got the game for it. He moves exceptionally well on the red dirt. So he should be looking to make some big moves in the next few weeks and months. Holger Rune against Nuno Borges. Now, Nuno Borges can play on clay. Rune is an accomplished clay courter. And even though he's so young, I think he's already proven that he has the game to succeed on clay. In Monte Carlo, the courts are not going to be as slow as Roland Garros or Rome, but they also won't be as quick as Madrid. So they're somewhere in between. I'm going to go with Rune and go with him to get the win there. Sonego and Pedro Martinez. It's an interesting one. I'm actually going to go with Pedro Martinez to get the win there, the Spaniard. And we've got Jordan Thompson versus Mpeshi Pericard. Now, look, both players, I think, would prefer grass or hard court, even though Pericard has actually won Junior Roland Garros, if I'm not mistaken. He has, as well, in fairness, won a clay court 250 in Lyon. I think he was on the last year or the year before. Sorry, not Lyon as a challenger, even, not 250. And he clearly has the type of game. And if I think about his game, he can hit huge kick serves. His forehand, he does put a lot of spin on that forehand. It's not just a flat Del Potro-like hammer. It's more like a Berrettini type forehand, actually. And on the one-hander, I mean, I think on any surface, it can be a little bit of a weakness, but he has continually improved it in the last 12 months or so, which is a great plus for him. And what he actually gets on clay, which we've seen with Tsitsipas as well, is that he actually gets more time to set up the one-hander. And also he has more time to run around it onto the forehand, so he can hit more forehands, which is a big plus for him. So we've got Pericard to get the win now. Tsitsipas and Djokovic both have buys. Wawrinka, Roland Garros champion in the past, it has a wild card. He plays Tabio. Look, I'd love to pick Stan, but Tabio is actually really solid on clay, and I think he might be too fresh for Stan, who hasn't really had the results in the last 12 months for me to back him up. I think he's just lost a yard or two movement-wise. I think it makes a difference at this level. And the ball striking is still there, but it's difficult to play at his explosive best if he's not able to actually get into position like he did in the past with a slower movement on this surface. And clay is a very physical affair. Struff and Ventura wildcard from, looks like, Monaco. We'll go with Struff. Jarry and Dimitrov. Jarry's not had a good start to the year. Dimitrov has had also not a particularly great start, but he does like Monte Carlo. Dimitrov definitely likes the atmosphere, so go with Dimitrov. Medvedev and Khachanov. I'm going to go with Khachanov. I just don't see Medvedev doing much in Monte Carlo. Look, the last tournament he won was nearly 2 years ago in Rome, so potentially he could do something in the clay court swing, but I don't know. There's just something about Medvedev at the moment which makes me think that he is really struggling with, I think, his identity actually as a tennis player right now, because the balls, the conditions, everything just doesn't seem to quite be clicking for him. His form, and He clearly doesn't feel comfortable, I don't think, he doesn't feel comfortable on court from the looks of it, in my opinion anyway. And it's a shame because he's such an intelligent player. You can see him trying to figure things out and piece it together, but it's just not quite working for him right now. Alexandra Muller to be a qualifier, and then Thomas Mahach and Sebastian Baez. On clay, I'm going to go with Baez. Dimona and Draper both have buys. Shapovalov, Shapovalov to be Giron. Echeverry to be a qualifier. Fokina, Shelton. Now, Shelton does have the game to do something on clay. I don't think he's going to be making deep runs at any of the major tournaments, if I'm being honest. I think Fokina will get the win here. TFO and Kekmanovic will go with TFO. Popper and Umber, I think both players would prefer if it was hard or grass. And Ugo Umber, I'll go with him. RBA versus Nakashima. We'll go Nakashima there, actually. Ruda and Rublev both have buys. Monfils to be a qualifier. Kaboli to be a qualifier. Feast to be Greek Sport and Clay. Felix Auger-Aliassime to be a qualifier. Arnaldi and Gasquet. I'd love to pick Gasquet, which, is going to be his last tournament at Monte Carlo. He's got a wild card. However, I think Arnaldi is going to have too much with Arnaldi to get the win there. Then we've got Fognini wildcard versus Francisco Cerundolo. Now, Fognini, of course, has won this tournament before in the past. Cerundolo. And Alcaraz has a bye. So, a round of 32. Zverev and Berrettini. I'm going to go for a big call here. I'm going to go with Berrettini to beat Zverev. I know. It's a big call. It is. I'm going for it. I don't think Sasha's going to solve the issues in Monte Carlo. I could be wrong. Musetti to beat Korda. Rune to beat Pedro Martinez. Tsitsipas and Pericard's an interesting one. Now, I think if this was on hard court, I'd maybe go for Pericard potentially, because Tsitsipas' return will struggle against Pericard's serve. I wonder if they've actually played before. I have a feeling that they have. I could be wrong. Let's have a look. No, they haven't. I'll go with Tsitsipas, just because Monte Carlo, and he just loves Monte Carlo. I would argue that he actually plays 10% better in Monte Carlo. Djokovic and Tabio. Now, the only time they played was actually last year in Rome, and Tabio beat him convincingly 6-3. 6-2, 6-3. And it was a really good win. Now, Djokovic is coming off a pretty positive, very positive Miami Open run, where he made the final, loss in 2 tiebreakers to Jakub Mensik. So I think he'll get the win here, get revenge. Struff and Dimitrov, I think. With Dimitrov. Hachinov to beat Muller. Baez to beat Dimona. I'm going to go for it. Dimona on clay is just not as potent as he is on a fast hard court or grass court. Draper, Shapovalov. I'll go with Draper. Echeverry to beat Fokina. TFO to beat Umber. Rude to beat Nakashima. Rublev to beat Monfils. Feast to beat Kaboli. Arnaldi to beat Felix Auger-Aliassime, even. Then Alcaraz and Cerundolo. Now, Alcaraz has never won Monte Carlo, and he actually has missed it a few times as well in his career. He could easily lose this one against Cerundolo, but we'll go with Alcaraz. Berrettini and Musetti in an all-Italian affair. This would be a great matchup. I think Musetti, though, for me. Rune and Tsitsipas would be great as well. Of course, Tsitsipas has never beaten Rune. I think it's 4-love now, the head-to-head. So this would be really interesting because Tsitsipas, of course, absolutely loves Monte Carlo. He's got such a great record in Monte Carlo. This would be his best opportunity, I think, to get a win over Rune, if I'm being honest. But they only played on clay once, which was Roland Garros in 2022, 4-set win. I'm going to stick with Steph in Monte Carlo. I'll stick with him finally getting a win. over Rune. Djokovic beat Dimitrov. I think we know that matchup is just so bad for Dimitrov, as we saw in Miami. Khachanov Baez will go for Baez. Draper Echeverry, it's a tough one on clay for Jack. We'll go for Echeverry. Rude to beat TFO. Feast Rublev. Rublev is tough customer on clay. Rublev. And Alcaraz Arnaldi. I'll go for Alcaraz. So quarterfinals, I've got Musetti Tsitsipas will go for Tsitsipas. Djokovic Baez. I'm going to go really left field here. Am I really going to pick Baez? That's a bit mad, isn't it? I mean, to pick him. I just think Djokovic is like historically just does not do that well at Monte Carlo. He hasn't won it since 2015, if I'm not mistaken. He made the semi-finals last year, but generally speaking, at the start of the clay court swing, and what he tends to do is just really warm into it. So he doesn't tend to win, at least in the last 10 years. He has won Monte Carlo before, but he's not looking. I don't think this is his main goal. He's looking to try and peak either during Roland Garros or during Rome, to then kind of kick on and make a big run for the French Open. So he's not the type of player, like he's always managed his calendar so that, when we get to Monte Carlo, he has lost to some random people or people that maybe we haven't expected him to lose to, like, for example, Musetti in the past or whoever in the past at Monte Carlo. So he lost to Casper Ruud last year in the semi-finals, and you could say, interesting. And he's lost to a few players in Monte Carlo that you think, how's he lost to him? But actually, it's just because he's not playing his best level in Monte Carlo. He's really just grooving, I think, is probably the right word for it. In Monte Carlo, it's just starting to get to grips with the surface. He doesn't play any tournaments before then. So, yeah, you know what? They've never played before. I'm going to go with Baez. Echeverry and Casper Ruud. And the reason I say Baez is because I think he might make it super physical for Djokovic. And I think at this stage, I don't think Djokovic is going to feel like he needs to really push himself against Baez. He wants to save himself, wants to save his best tennis for Roland Garros, right? That's where he really wants to excel. And I think making the quarterfinals of Monte Carlo is not a bad result for him. I don't think he's too fast, if I'm being honest, with winning Monte Carlo. Echeverry and Ruud. I'm going to go with Ruud. Alcaraz should beat Rublev even on clay. So semi-finals of Tsitsipas and Baez. Will go for Tsitsipas and Ruud and Alcaraz. I'm actually going to go with Ruud to beat Alcaraz, which is a bit of a big call, but I just think, sorry, excuse me, Alcaraz has not been playing as badly as Zverev, but he has been playing great. Now, I think he will start to kind of feel the ball a lot better on clay. He's got more time, and he does, I think, like moving on the clay. I know he's actually said that grass and hard courts he prefers them actually to clay court, but I think he is a natural on clay. I just think Ruud absolutely loves it, and he's almost already playing some of his best tennis as soon as the clay court swing starts. So I think he might just catch Alcaraz a little bit cold. So that gives us a final of Tsitsipas and Casper Ruud. Do I go for Tsitsipas to win it yet again, or do I go for Casper Ruud to win it? And I actually am going to go with Casper Ruud to win the Monte Carlo Masters. Let me know in the comment section below who you think is going to win and why. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you in the next video.